and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Katie, otherwise known as the Vintage Academic. I am a transfer student and rising senior at UC Berkeley. I study anthropology and archaeology. And before we get started, I also want to talk a little bit about my role as the lead transfer consultant at Accepted Consulting. So I assume that if you are here and you are watching this video, then you are either a community college student or you're a transfer student or you're going through the transfer process. If that is correct, then you're definitely in the right place, and I also want to share a resource with you that you might find helpful in your transfer journey. Like I said, I'm the lead transfer consultant for the college admissions business Accepted Consulting, and we have a free new resource for transfer students. If you check the description below, there is a link to a Google form where you can sign up for a transfer student email newsletter designed to bring you important information about the transfer process and kind of guide you through the application process for the fall. So if you're a future transfer student, don't forget to check that out, and also find me on Accepted Consulting's website if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one consultation with me, and we can talk about your transfer application to get you into your dream university. Alright, now let's get started. So today I wanted to finally sit down and share with YouTube my entire transfer journey from the start all the way back in junior high school, which is really when all of this started, to almost failing out of high school to now being a 4.0 student at UC Berkeley. This is probably going to be a bit of a longer video, so get settled, grab a drink, grab a snack, whatever it is you need, and let's get into it. And actually, I need a drink of water first. I'll be back. So to really talk about my entire transfer journey, we need to go a little bit ways back in my educational journey as a child. When I was in elementary school, I did fairly well. I was actually placed into the Gifted and Talented Education classes, or GATE, which I chose not to do. But overall, I was pretty engaged in school. I had some red flags for undiagnosed ADHD, but that's another story. I was engaged, I was interested, my parents were available to help me with homework. They were also present and, provided the support that I would need to be successful in education. Now, when I got to junior high school, which if you don't know is similar to middle school, where I went to school, we did elementary school from 1st to 6th grade, and then junior high school from 7th to 9th grade, and then high school from 10th to 12th grade. Kind of confusing, but so when I was entering into junior high school, I was starting 7th grade. I was 12 years old, and one of the most significant things in my life happened. My dad died. My dad died in September of my first year of junior high school. Losing a parent, just in general, caused a really big ripple effect in my educational career. It not only meant that I was struggling with the grief of losing a parent and therefore found it much more difficult to focus on my homework. I missed a lot of school, I fell behind. Some kind of agreement was found with my mother and the school board, or my teachers at my junior high school, where they agreed to judge me on pass no pass basis rather than giving me a letter grade. Personally, I think that most of my teachers passed me for the sake of passing me without actually ensuring that I was learning the information that one is supposed to learn in junior high school as a 7th grader, when the rest of your classes throughout junior high school and high school are going to build upon what you're learning in previous years. At the same time as this was going on, I was also obviously dealing with undiagnosed ADHD, which I've been dealing with my entire life, which if you want to know more about my ADHD diagnosis and how I got it, go ahead and check out the link in the card or in the description. I made a whole video about that. But in terms of grief combined with ADHD already makes it very difficult to pay attention to things, to follow through on things, to remember things, to do your homework. So at the same time that I was grieving the loss of a parent, I was also dealing with undiagnosed ADHD, which also meant that there were impacts in my home life, things like not being able to clean my room, or getting in trouble for forgetting to do my chores, or getting detention at school because I forgot my gym clothes. So it all kind of compounded into this effect where I always felt like I wasn't a very good student, and I wasn't. So going back to education, I failed my classes, especially things like math, so fast and so poorly that I was put into remedial classes starting in junior high school. I was put into remedial math classes every single year, even in high school, and I was required to go to summer school like most summers. Especially as I moved into high school and started getting closer to being a graduating senior, I was required to go to summer school to catch up on the classes I had either been failing or or just wasn't doing very well in and forgetting to do my homework in. So that kind of like defines my junior high school experience. My dad died and I had undiagnosed ADHD, and because I was now living in a single parent household, my mother had to work a lot more than she used to, so she wasn't quite always present to catch the things that were going wrong, and she also didn't want to force certain types of behavior from me for the fear of ruining our relationship, which I honestly think as an adult was a good choice, but it meant that I was falling behind in school. Moving on into high school. So when I went to high school, I actually decided to take some time to reflect and look back at junior high school and say, you know what, that traditional style obviously did not work for me, and I had two options for high schools. I could either go to the traditional high school or I could go to a charter academy. I decided to go to the charter academy because the charter academy was technology and project-based learning, so everything that we did revolved around doing it with a group of people. That definitely helped a little bit because it meant that my work was accountable for other people's grades as well, so it meant that I did show up more in terms of completing my homework and getting things turned in on time and actually remembering the material and being able to focus, but it still wasn't great. Like I said, I was still going to summer school every summer. I was still forgetting to do my homework, especially homework assignments that were individual. And because of what happened in junior high school, I was so far behind from the rest of my classmates that I think I started trying to overcompensate for the fact that I felt much lesser than my fellow students by doing things like choosing to go to a fairly intense project-based high school and dancing ballet 5 to 6 times a week and trying to do cosplay and having a social life, starting up a YouTube channel, basically doing anything but school in retrospect, not only because I was interested in them, but also to try and kind of, fill in the gap where school wasn't happening for me. Anyways, let's fast forward a little bit. I've told you about what happened in junior high school, how that affected high school. Now let's get to me as a graduating senior. So approaching being a graduating senior, I have this very distinct memory of being a junior in my English class, and our teacher was giving us a module or like a unit about college preparedness and college applications and getting ready for the SAT and the ACTs and all that kind of stuff. During this unit, we spent a lot of time researching what universities we might want to go to, looking at what the applications looked at, writing practice college admissions essays, also that we would be prepared for when the time actually came around to be submitting our applications, which is what we should have been doing in the fall as juniors. And the reason why I bring this up is because this memory is a very defining moment for me in terms of like my high school and college career, and it definitely really sticks out to me. So I remember sitting at the table on my crappy school-issued laptop thinking to myself, this is pointless. I don't want to do this. I'm never going to college. I don't know enough. I'm definitely not smart enough to go to college. Because I didn't feel smart enough, because of everything that happened to me in junior high school and high school, and just constantly feeling like I've been left behind in terms of gaining an education, and I don't know, maybe speaking to the school system here in America and letting kids fall through the cracks, which, I mean, mine isn't the worst case obviously, but I constantly felt like I was not smart enough. I did not have plans for after high school. I didn't think I would make it as far as I have today, so I honestly didn't know what to do, how to do it, or even think that it was a realistic possibility for me. And so I didn't bother applying to any colleges when I was in high school. I literally just did not do the work because I didn't think there was a point. And let me tell you, when all of my friends and my classmates, the people around me, were filling out their applications and being really excited to talk about what universities they wanted to go to, and eventually when admissions rolled around and people were getting into colleges and having friends who actually had plans for after high school, I felt horrible. I really felt like I was a lesser person than they were, and it felt really bad to constantly tell myself these negative messages about what I was capable of in terms of going to college. And like I said, this might be a failure of the school system, but it also might speak to the experience of having undiagnosed ADHD, which is a perspective on this that I didn't have before because I just recently got diagnosed, and I'm starting to now see my life history through that lens. But whatever the cause, the point is, it still really sucked. And that's the feeling that followed me through the rest of my junior year and into my senior year of high school, all through graduating. But Here's where the story kind of starts to turn around a little bit. I know it's been pretty depressing up until now. When I graduated, I was lucky enough to have a handful of friends who decided that they were going to go to community college. I personally decided that I wanted to take a year off after graduating high school just to get a job and kind of take a break from the absolute burnt out feeling that I was experiencing from struggling through high school this entire time. But while I was doing that, I had the privilege of getting to watch some of my friends kind of start or restart their educational careers through community college because they also had struggled through high school. But here's the thing. When I was in high school, nobody told me that community college was an option. No one even told me that it was something that existed. I had no idea how the college system worked. I had no idea what the differences were between a public, research, or private institution, or the difference between out-of-state colleges and community colleges, or even what the difference was between a BA, a BS, an MA, and a PhD. I literally had no understanding of how the higher educational system worked, which I find surprising because both my parents had advanced degrees, but I digress. The important point is that nobody in high school told me that community college was an option. When my English teacher was teaching that module about applying to colleges, the only thing that she talked about was applying to colleges. Applying to the UCs, the CSUs, out-of-state institutions, the private schools, filling out the application, writing the essays, what kinds of grades and GPA and ACT scores you're going to need to get into university after college, but she never once talked about community college as an option. And honestly, that's one of the biggest reasons why I make the content that I do today here on my channel, where I talk about going to community college and the transfer process and helping people figure out whether or not that's something they want to do and how to do it successfully. I make this content so that people like me, lost teenagers like I once was, have some kind of resource to help them figure out what their options are for pursuing an education, and so I can advocate for the incredibly helpful system that is community college. Anyways, let me calm down a little bit. And now that I've covered what my camera is telling me is 20 minutes worth of my educational background from junior high and high school, let's finally get into my community college story and how I ended up at UC Berkeley. So while it was very important to talk about my high school experience because it explains why I ultimately went to community college, I'm sure the content that you're actually here for is how I transferred from community college to UC Berkeley, so let's get started on that. So after I finished my gap year and I decided to try my hand at community college, I somehow fumbled my way through the admissions process, which included an orientation and taking placement testing for things like English and math. Once I had sorted all of that out, I had decided that for whatever reason, the way I was going to approach community college was to just get my general education units out of the way as fast as I possibly could. But to start off slow, for my first semester, I enrolled in an English course and an algebra course, if I recall correctly, math course, which was a horrible idea. First of all, I hated my English class. I did not like my professor. I did not understand the way he taught, nor did I appreciate the way he gave us feedback. I ultimately stopped going to that English class, but like I said, I did not have a clear understanding of the college system, so I did not understand that in order to stop going to a class without getting an F on your transcript, that you had to go through the formal withdrawal process. So I just stopped going and ultimately got an F in that class for not going to class. And then I got a C in my math class, which honestly I'm not super mad at because math is very difficult for me and I'm pretty sure I have dyscalculia, which is like dyslexia but for math. But anyways, after that fantastic failure of a first semester at community college, the next semester I decided, you know what, let's just take a couple of classes that sound interesting because maybe if they're interesting I'll actually want to go to them. So I decided to sign up for human sexuality, which was a psychology course, and the anthropology of religion. And this is where things really started to turn around for me. Not only was the human sexuality course very interesting, and it was really the opportunity that I needed to prove to myself that I was capable of doing independent research and writing academically and getting good grades, but the anthropology course that I signed up for really sparked something in me. It ignited a little fire of passion in me, which, as cheesy as that sounds, it's so very true. After that anthropology course had sparked an interest in me, I decided to keep taking anthropology courses. Starting next with taking biological anthropology, where I actually scored the highest in the entire class. Because I was super interested in the topic and I'd started getting a handle on what college courses were like. I wanted to take advantage of any and all extra credit opportunities because I was so excited by the course material. This is when I realized that this topic was getting me so excited that it was probably something I should major in. I had become so passionate about anthropology that I was asking for anthropology books for my birthday and for Christmas. I did ultimately end up declaring my major as anthropology, obviously, because that's what I study at Berkeley. It compelled me to figure out how to fund my community college education, and I started really working on my study skills so that I would have the ability to take the courses that I needed to take but weren't all that interesting to me, so that I was able to get the grades I needed to not only be successful in my major but to transfer to a four-year university. Sparking this passion for anthropology is what made me start looking for any opportunity to engage in anthropology and archaeology. And it got me much more involved on the campus, including joining the Anthropology Club. And I bring up the Anthropology Club because not only was it something I really enjoyed doing and it was very important to me and it's something I could put on my application, but the Anthropology Club really was the catalyst for me understanding what transferring to a four-year university could look like, and for showing me UC Berkeley's campus and realizing where I wanted to go with my education in anthropology. The support that I received from the professors who advised the club and just my fellow community college classmates in the Anthropology Club was absolutely paramount to me being able to transfer. The advisor for the club, my amazing anthropology professor, always worked so hard to provide ample educational opportunities for her students, and it was because of this professor that I was able to do volunteer archaeology with the Bureau of Land Management, which was what ultimately led me to getting the paid archaeological position that I had over the summer. But I think most importantly, she was the one that showed me that transferring was a reality that I could achieve. Now, you know how I've been saying throughout this entire video that I really didn't have an understanding of how the college system worked? That was true both in high school and in community college, and I knew that I was working towards something, but that something still wasn't 100% clear at this point in my community college journey. So right when I was trying to figure all of this out and try to find a goal to work towards in terms of my education, was when this professor organized a behind-the-scenes collection tour of the Phoebe Hearst Museum here at UC Berkeley. We had the opportunity to not only go and see the actual exhibit, but to go into the basement with the collections and the artifacts, to meet the director of the museum, to witness undergraduate and graduate students working in the labs, performing original research and using materials in the museum. We also spent a lot of time in Berkeley that day. We wandered the city, we had lunch at House of Curry, and I also have another very distinct memory of walking past the university library, the big, gorgeous, beautiful building, falling absolutely in love with the campus and the architecture and the idea of studying at Berkeley in the anthropology department. And that was when I finally knew that I had figured out where I was going to go after community college. It was going on that field trip, being involved in my community college campus, that really showed me what transferring could look like and gave me a specific direction to work towards. So, enough of that sappy story. Around October 2018, it was maybe even early November, a month before the UC application is due, I decided I was going to go all in on trying to apply to the UCs. I remember I had taken a look at my units and my required coursework, and I'd watched a couple of YouTube videos about people who had been offered a spring admission rather than a fall admission to the UCs, and I knew that some of the CSUs also did spring admission, so I decided I was going to take a chance of transferring to a UC on a spring admission, but specifically because I had not finished fulfilling all of my requirements yet, both in terms of total units and the specific classes that I needed to transfer, which I know was a big mistake, but at that point I was so excited at the thought of transferring and I didn't want to have to wait an entire another year to apply, but I really was not prepared. I did not have all the requirements that you need to be a transfer. In addition, not taking any of the technicalities into consideration, I also did not give myself enough time to write good essays, nor did I understand exactly what the UCs were looking for in terms of essays. The essays that I wrote ended up being really just awful, really bad, like a really good example of a really bad essay. And if you yourself want to hear them so you know what not to do, you can check the card or the links in the description, because I made a whole video where I read my really terrible essays out loud and you can gawk at them in horror. and use them as a good example of what not to do. So if you take all of that together, I was 100% rightly rejected from the two UCs that I applied to, UC Berkeley and UC Davis. Rather than letting that get me down, I took it as a very important lesson, and in 2019, when I knew the application season was starting again, and I took the next year to finish fulfilling my requirements and giving myself enough time in 2019 to actually consider what I wanted to write about, brainstorming essay topics, and really considering how I wanted to present myself to the UCs as a potential transfer student. I started looking at the prompts and figuring out which ones I wanted to write about as early as July, and really worked hard on writing essays that actually reflected who I was as a person and what I wanted the UCs to actually know about me in a much more creative and unique way. And if you're curious and you also want to hear what my accepted essays sounded like, I'll leave a link to that video in the description below as well. So like I said, during this time, I had also fulfilled my requirements. I had joined the Honor Society, I'd become the president of the Anthropology Club, I'd gained more professional experience by interning at a museum, I did another round of volunteer archaeology, and just like doing things that I could put on my application and really rounded out my educational experience and showed the UCs that I was serious about pursuing anthropology. So real quick, just to summarize, the difference between applying in 2018 and applying in 2019, finish my requirements, continue to get good grades, use the extra year to get much more experience. And lastly, I had also come across Kaylin's channel, The Redhead Academic, where she was offering essay editing consultation services, and I took her up on that offer. I was actually her first client prior to the official founding of Accepted Consulting, and together we worked to make these strengths of my application really shine. Now, when it comes to the schools that I applied to, which I feel like is relevant information as a transfer, I only applied to the UCs. If I'm being completely honest, it's because I knew that I did not want to go outside of California. I knew I wasn't going to be able to afford like out-of-state tuition, and I have like family matters to attend to in California. And I also knew that the UC application is just one application for all 9 of the schools, and I was feeling kind of lazy. I also wanted to take advantage of the TAG, or the Transfer Admission Guarantee, which if you haven't heard about that, I've also made a video about that. So I wanted to take advantage of it, using it as kind of like a backup school in case I didn't get into the other schools that I applied to. And I did end up receiving the low income fee waiver, so I was able to send my application to 4 universities for free, and then a 5th one for the cost of 1 application, which I think was $75. And if you have again seen any of my videos, and especially my admissions decision video, you would know that I got into all of the schools that I applied to. I got into UC Davis on the TAG, and then I also got into UC San Diego, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, and UC Berkeley. Now if we fast forward a little bit to where I am now, I have now completed my junior year at UC Berkeley as an anthropology major, and have finished all of the classes I've taken with A's, hence the title of this video being a 4.0 student at UC Berkeley. Since we are nearing the end of this video, I feel like I should offer an explanation of how I've been able to get good grades at UC Berkeley, and if you're interested, I'd like to make a more in-depth video on this topic because it's very complicated. Let me know, leave me a comment below, and I'll definitely get on that. Now, while I honestly want to say that I don't know how I did it because this last semester has been a huge struggle, I want to give myself more credit than that and say that a lot of it has to do with the skills that I learned in community college. In community college, I learned the skills of being a student that I never learned in high school, like time management, how to read academically, how to read critically, how to write academically, just general study skills, literally without going to community college first before heading into a 4-year university. I don't think I would be able to perform as well as I have at Berkeley, much less even get into Berkeley, right? Because I almost failed out of high school. If I had come to Berkeley straight out of high school, or really any other 4-year university for that matter, I think I would have crashed and burned miserably. And that is why I am so grateful for the fact that community colleges exist. They exist to give people the opportunity to access education that is otherwise fairly inaccessible. Whether you're a high school failure like me, or you're a student parent who needs flexibility, or you're returning to education later on in life, whatever your story is, community colleges have provided so much for us non-traditional students. And I'm so eternally grateful that I was given the opportunity to become the student that I wanted to be. So, yeah, that is essentially my entire transfer journey, from being a horrible high school student to almost dropping out of high school, if I'm completely honest, to being a rising senior with straight A's at UC Berkeley with professional experience under my belt and getting ready to apply to grad school, which is something I never thought I'd be able to say. My mom has a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, and a doctorate of veterinary medicine, and I never thought I would be able to live up to even like the bare minimum of what she's done. So it feels pretty cool to say that I'm heading into applying to grad schools now. Well, I'm sure that this was a really long video, so thank you so much for sticking around and watching through the entire thing. As I am going into being a senior at Berkeley and watching my college graduation quickly approaching, I'm really glad that I can share this story with other people and hopefully inspire other community college students and future transfer students to pursue their academic dreams. So that is all for now. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a like. Leave me a comment if you want to see that video about how I get and maintain my grades at Berkeley. Subscribe for more UC Berkeley transfer, vintage, and sometimes archaeology related content. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!